everyone, and welcome to Meticulous Moments, where we facilitate community upliftment through leadership development. And this evening, we have the wonderful privilege of spending time with Matthew Brackett. Matthew, how are you?
Very well, Juanita. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be on Meticulous Moments.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us and for making the time. I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience. I met you in St. Louis at the BLN Executive Entrepreneur Summit, but would you like to explain to the audience what your niche is? How do you help people in this world?
Thank you. Thank you, Juanita. So yes, my name is Matthew Brackett from small town New England, the 10th of 13 children. And what I do is I really work with people in senior leadership roles. I meet them at that intersection between their personal and professional so that they can lead better, love better, and live better, especially in their inner circles of influence, whether that be personal or professional. And so I do that through individual coaching, and I do it also through speaking engagements and educational engagements.
Absolutely phenomenal. We had a presentation that you gave at the BLN seminar at the summit. I would love for us to talk a little bit about mushrooms. You know what you were discussing there. That was quite a wonderful approach.
Thank you. Yes, I made a mistake in that because I was talking about smoking mushrooms because I have no idea about mushrooms. And then the people clarified that you don't smoke mushrooms, you eat them. But the image, I don't know how much you want me to go into it. I'll follow your lead. But the image is really based on a conversation that I had with Michelle Mraz on her program that airs mostly in Asia. And it's the program, she called the title The Deeper Calling, which was about my story. But part of my story is also the work that I've done with a lot of people. And so the image that I use is working with a lot of people it's a natural tendency as human beings that things that are uncomfortable for us, things that are difficult for us, whether it be trauma or whether it be things that are guilt or full of shame or whatever it is, uncomfortable, we put them away. We want to put them into darkness. And an image that I use is like a little closet where we put things away and we hope that they don't bother us or they just disappear. But there's some things in our lives as human beings that when we put them into darkness, when we put them into a little closet and hoping that they won't bother us, they actually begin to grow over time. Now, there's so many things that we could talk about and around this. But anyways, Michelle talked about it. Then she said, oh, well, that reminds me, maybe it's like kind of like fungus in the shower or in dark, moist places is where mushrooms grow, right? And so using that image, at BLN, we talked about what mushrooms are you growing and how much do they cost? Yeah. So really the point is, what's the price? That those things that we're not dealing with, what price are we going to pay down the road? As they grow, they begin to grow, and then they begin to kind of grow outside of the closet, right? The door bursts open at some point, and there they are. And then it ends up being, normally as human beings, it ends up being sort of a crisis moment.
That's true.
I'm a big fan of I'm a big fan of crisis. Well-managed crisis can be it's a great opportunity of growth for us as human beings. Yes. But also crisis. Preventive maintenance was what I call it, crisis prevention or preventive maintenance, whether we do it on cars, whether we do it on the machines in the house, whether we do it on the house, but also in our lives. Preventive maintenance is a much wiser approach to life, but not always the approach we take, because as human beings, well, we have these mechanisms of defense where everything's okay. We tell ourselves that everything is okay. The things that we put away in the closet, they're okay. Everything's good until it's not. Mm-hmm. And it's crisis partly because it catches us off guard. Mm-hmm. Right? And then decision making in crisis is a challenge for us as human beings, because our brain has a hard time with crisis, has a hard time with change. And so when we're in crisis, our brain shifts to self-protection mode, survival mode. Yeah. In that mode, we don't always make decisions that will serve the bigger picture. We might make decisions. We make decisions that might serve that specific moment to survive, to get out of the pain. But then when we look back, we're like, oh, I wish I would have dealt with this better, or dealt with that crisis better. And so there's the topic that I like to talk about in decision making is patience in decision making, right? To allow ourselves to sit with situations, because part of our humanity wants to jump out of them. And so we make impulsive decisions, get out of uncomfortable situations, difficult situations, painful situations, whatever it is. And so patience in decision making is a real art. It's very challenging to do.
Yeah.
But we always want to think about down the road, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. When I look back on this moment, how do I want to look back on it? What do I want to look back on? And how would I like myself to have made it through this moment? Right? How do I want to see myself? So anyways, I sort of went on a tangent there, but I get very excited.
I love that. My goodness, wise words of wisdom there. And there's a difference between making or taking a leap of faith and making an impulsive decision. And I found in the years, counseling people, some people don't know the difference. There's a difference between taking a leap of faith and making an impulsive decision. You really, really have to think through both of those. And I love the image that you used about the mushrooms, because yes, we live in a society where everybody wants to, put things away. They don't want to deal with it because it's hard or it's painful. Right. But in actual fact, you can never estimate when it's really going to bulge out of that closet, when it's really going to become uncontrollable and take over. So it's very good that we put these systems into place and teach people to deal with it when it arises. And I love the fact that we don't always, but we are able to emotionally detach ourselves from a crisis period. Because the moment we think about something emotionally, our humanness takes over and we want to self-protect, and that's not always the best thing to do. If you can learn how to detach yourself emotionally, to see the problem for what it is, you can deal with it better. If you're able not to internalize whatever the problem is and to see the problem for what it is, the obstacle that it really represents, you can scale, you can overcome that obstacle, you can be victorious. And, here at Meticulous, we love to talk about leadership, gratitude, community upliftment. And I wanted to touch on those themes today, leadership of self and others, gratitude. What's your mindset in the morning when you wake up? That really sets the energy for your day. That really sets your day up from the initial get-go. And how the way that we lead ourselves and others, how the way that we express gratitude and internalize, that's a good thing to internalize. How we internalize gratitude essentially affects the community. So let's talk a little bit about your view on leadership, gratitude, and community.
Yes, no, of course, that's a lot. But you lead me down that path. But I want to go off of what you just said is about our emotions, because this has to do with leadership of self. Emotions are very real for us, and we have to pay attention to them. But sometimes they help us reach our big picture goals, but sometimes they can also be obstacles. So going back to decision making, as you said, impulsive decision making, or making decisions from a negative place, from a place of anger, from a place of vengeance. Right? All those are legitimate emotions. But is that the way I want to see myself react? When I look back on this moment, will I be proud of the way I dealt with this? Right? And it's, when people go through hurt, especially if the hurt was caused by someone else, well, anger is a very natural emotion. But if anger dictates the way I react to it, and we might not be proud of that moment when we look back on it and say, well, I could have done better. Okay, and so the negative emotions can really, they're very real, and we have to be able to label them, but also understand that, is that where I want to make decisions from? Yes. And another thing is also, many of us can be victims of different situations. Right? And so there's hurt, there's betrayal, there's anger, there's all these other things. But again, is that in the big picture, is that the place where I want to make my decisions from? Will that serve me? Will that serve, in the end, will that serve me the best way I can? Or am I end up being also a victim of those emotions, which is natural that we suffer that as human beings. All this is very normal in the human experience, but it's very hard.
Yes.
Okay, but and I talk about this so that we to avoid, hopefully, to avoid myself or others as much. What's the word? Is when we regret. Right?
Mm.
Then when we look back on things with a little bit of regret, like, oh, I wish I could have done better. But we also learn from those. So it's also about learning from the moments when we haven't made the best decisions. And I've had many of those. I'm sure we all had. And to be able to look back on them and understand and analyze the dynamics, learn from it, and move forward. So all this has to do, Juanita, with self-leadership. There's many aspects of self-leadership, but this is one, is how we make decisions. And when we have negative emotions, is that the place where we're making decisions from. You also talk about gratitude, right, which is a very positive decision. And I'm not sure where you want to go with that. You talked about self-leadership, gratitude, and what else?
How do we start our day? Our gratitude really sets that energy for our day. Do we practice that? And what effect does that have on us?
Right. And let's go back to negative. A lot of us, well, at least me, I begin my day. There's there's negative emotions. Like, I don't want, but that's a little slump. And so do we let that take control of our day, right? Is the first decision of my day to put off my day for a few more minutes, right? Procrastinate, which is a common experience for me. Right? The first decision I'm going to make today is to not do anything, right? is to put everything off, right? But then when we look back on that, and this happens to me on a regular basis, I look back and I could have done better. I feel better when I wake up early and when I get an early start in the day, and when I begin the day on a positive note, right? And not I'm not on a note of let's put this day off for another half an hour. Okay. But that's what gratitude. And gratitude, again, we have negative emotions, but also it's important to find ways to foster and cultivate positive emotions. One of them is gratitude. There's a phrase which is very meaningful, which is that gratitude is one of the rarest flowers in the garden of virtues.
It's beautiful.
And that phrase has always spoke to me. And I think naturally in my own life, I've always striven to be thankful. For so many things, for people, for situations, and in my own story, as I look back, I'm thankful also for the pain that I've been through. You don't feel thankful when you're going through it, right? But through anything. But I suppose the lessons that you learn, that's why, again, being able to look back and say, all right, I'm thankful for what I've been through. Gratitude, we can exercise gratitude. Obviously, if there's people with faith following us, or in a relationship with the transcendent, that's their relationship to the transcendent, to the higher power, to God, whatever word they put there. Then there's gratitude towards those around us. And if we're in romantic relationships, the gratitude toward my spouse. And sometimes we take things for granted. Things that they are a duty, they are obligations, and the gratitude is such a beautiful flower. And so to be thankful to my spouse, to be thankful to my children, to be thankful to people that work for me or the people that I work with. Sure, there's this attitude of, well, they're just doing their job, so why do I need to be thankful? Well, because I think gratitude, it's a beautiful flower. And I think the more we can cultivate it, the better the aroma around us, around the people that we work with. And then gratitude towards ourselves. Also, oftentimes we can get caught up in negative feelings towards ourselves, the negative voices. But we can also, hopefully, thank you. Sometimes we have these conversations going on inside of us, but to be able to thank ourselves. Thank you for eating healthy. Thank you for, going to the gym today. Well done. Thank you for getting up on time and starting your day early. Thank you for having routines and for taking care of your routines, because in the end, your routines will take care of you. Right? Thank you for having the courage to take care of your humanity, because in the end, your humanity will take care of you. So gratitude towards self, And that's not selfishness. It's just,
Yeah.
it's honoring the good decisions and the way we've been able to do things, and not just decisions, but how we've executed them. Gratitude towards the love to those around us, whether it be in the personal and professional space, right? And then gratitude towards that supreme power, or the
Yeah.
whatever the superior being, right? Whether it be God, whether it be even just another thing I would add to this is gratitude towards Mother Earth. Holy smokes, right? That we have air, that we have nature, that we have water, that we have, and so many laws of nature that nourish us in our lives. Even just the law of gravity, right? Or things like this. So many different aspects of nature that we can take for granted, and so to be able to look at a horizon, look at the sky, look at the sunset, look at the clouds, look at nature, the trees, the flower, anything. Say thank you, right? Thank you. So there we go. That's a little bit about gratitude.
Love that, love that. Here in South Africa, we have amazing sunsets. So definitely thankful and grateful for those. And you're speaking about anger, and I've been teaching people for years when they have been, through a crisis or a traumatic event. Anger is that emotion that comes up when pain hasn't been dealt with. And I really encourage them to do introspection and to become self aware of the triggers that they have, consciously and subconsciously. And talking about relationships, you and I both served in the religious space for quite a few years. You were a priest, I was a pastor, and we worked with a lot of people with relationships. We counseled, did spiritual counseling, and looked after the flock. And relationships is a big topic when you are serving as a pastor or a priest. And I wanted to ask you your view on self-awareness. How does that affect the efficiency and the fluidity of a relationship? It can be any relationship, work related, people that serve on the same committees at church.
Of course.
Anything that you would like to touch on?
Yes, thank you, Juanita. Whether it be in the personal space or in the professional space or in the romantic space, self-awareness, I say that self-awareness is one of the greatest assets a leader can have, and the lack of self-awareness can be one of the liabilities that a leader or that a person can have. Now, the difficult thing is that when we're not self-aware, everyone thinks they're self-aware. Okay, and so we can be blinded by ourselves. With, oh, I don't have a problem with self-awareness, whereas everyone around you says, well, maybe you do. Right? So the challenge is that everyone thinks that they're self-aware, and so we're not aware of our own blind spots. So how willing? Now, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage, and if we want to use the word also humility, people say, well, maybe I'm not as self-aware as I think I am, or as I thought I am. And because of, going back to what we said before, because of those patterns that we have as human beings to protect ourselves, we don't realize the things that we're not dealing with, or that we're not dealing with in a healthy way.
Yes.
And oftentimes those around us can see certain aspects of our lives a bit more clearly than we can see our own. And so this happens in professionally, and I like to use leadership, but again, in those different realms we've talked about self-leadership, the leadership in my personal circles, right, which is also romantic leadership. And I don't mean that in a couple that one is over another. It's not that. It's when leadership is influence in the simplest of definitions. It's a little bit more complex than that. But if it's influence, well, in a relationship, there's leadership. There's influence going both ways in a romantic relationship, and we hope that that's positive influence.
Yes.
Right? And then also, if you have children, that towards your children, that it's positive influence in the big picture, going towards the people around me. And so what you're saying around self-awareness is oftentimes, whether it be with ourselves, whether it be in that romantic setting or personal or professional space, we're not aware that when that influence is being negative, right? When that influence is destructive or hurtful, or just use the word negative. And sometimes it is. All right. And so, but sometimes we don't realize it. All right. And that's the blindness that we have. And so that's why I am a firm believer in using good assessments to help someone to know themselves better, to help cover blind spots. And that's why in the leadership space, that's why 360 assessments are very helpful, because it helps shed light. Again, it's always a subjective perspective. It's not saying that everyone else has the perfect or full vision. No, but when we piece together that puzzle of what you know about yourself and what others perceive or see, well, we make a little bit more sense. And I work with couples, and there's an assessment. There's two very sophisticated assessments that I use with them, and part of it is so that they get to know themselves personally better. First, okay, get to know yourself better. Then be able to see your spouse better, right? To understand who they are, to understand why they act the way they are, why they communicate the way they communicate. Because oftentimes it's personality styles that we were blinded to. Right? And also, we talk about love languages, as people love in different ways and they need to be loved in different ways. It's also understanding someone's values, what's important to them. It's also understanding what their needs are. And also understanding their context, where they come from, because that determines certain aspects about ourselves. So the assessment, the work that I do with couples is so beautiful, because it helps. You just see with the couples that like, first of all, they're able to understand themselves better, and then they're able to look at their spouse with greater clarity and say, oh, now I understand a little bit better. Okay, and I want to support you, and not that these things that I didn't understand become points of conflict, but that rather now they become points of light, points of unity, and how we can grow together. So going back to your question, all of this is about self-awareness. But when we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, when it's how do I measure my self-awareness? How do I know? Because we all assume that we have very good self-awareness. Okay, and then when we step into the leadership space, or the older we are, the more mature we are, the better we think we are at things. And if you're in a leadership space, for example, you become a senior leader in your organizations, whatever the organization is, you're going to think, well, it's because I'm good at what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. I'm a subject matter expert. And so if I'm in this position, then it must mean that I'm good at what I'm doing. And so I don't need help to become more self-aware. I don't need coaching. I don't need someone to walk with me, or because I've made it this far, so I must be doing something right. And that's a challenging place to be, because again, it's our own blindness. Because as human beings, I believe that we all need each other. And it's not that someone's better than anyone. It's the fact that when we have someone like we're doing now, when we have someone that we can talk to, we're able to grow in our self-awareness. We're able to listen to ourselves, discover a lot of things about ourselves, because I'm talking about it with someone in a confidential space, or someone who has my best interest in mind. And oftentimes it's hard to find that space.
Yes.
In a romantic relationship, you're taking care of certain dynamics, right? And certain interests. In other friendship relationships, you're taking care, you're caring for certain interests and dynamics, which are all natural. In the professional space, where there's a certain facade that we have, because we're caring for certain dynamics and interests. And so, but we all need a safe space where we can talk about, where we can take off the mask and just be, this is me, this is what I'm going through, this is what, right? And then by talking about it, and talking about what my goals are, who I really want to be, then we begin to find the answers. And again, I'm saying, not the other person doesn't necessarily have the answers, but that's how we process things as human beings. And even more so when we're confused, that we, that sort of a ball of thread that I use, that image of a ball of thread that's sort of all jumbled up inside of us. And by talking about it, we begin to sort of separate the threads and begin to make sense of things. We begin to see it. And then when we hear ourselves say certain things, we take more ownership of what it is. Okay, and when we translate something from an emotion or a thought into words, it becomes more real. That's why sometimes when people start talking about something, they get emotional, or they start laughing, or they get angry, because something has become more real for them. That's a powerful process, and it's so important for us as human beings. And a lot of times we want to deal with things on our own. No, we get stuck in our head. We become our greatest obstacle. And so that's the important aspect of what we did in ministry, what I do now in coaching and education, right? Of being that sort of mirror for someone to be able to reflect on themselves or life, and I facilitate a process where they can discover the answers and where they can get to know themselves better. The better you know yourself, the better you're going to lead, the better you're going to love, the better you're going to live.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Juan. I know I've gone on for a bit, but
I love it. Thank you, Matthew. I agree with you. You know, self-awareness is essential. And I also feel it's a type of ownership. When you go on that journey of self-awareness, own your mistakes, own your flaws, own the things that you do right, the things that you are good at. Look at the areas that you can improve on. And, you know, you touched on relationships, for instance, people that are partners. And really, like you said, if you become aware of yourself and your partner, you know, you understand them so much better. And to me, when adversity then strikes, because let's be honest, adversity will strike during the course of our lives.
right.
I feel that when that self-awareness is in place, problem solving becomes easier because we know each other, we know the way that we think, we know that what options will be a possible resolve. So I really, you know, the work that you do is so imperative out there for people to really learn how to deal with life and how to go about it. And you touched on it now, and I want to ask you, how important, because you were talking essentially about a psychological safe space between partners, you know, people, even if it's a friendship, relationship, how important is that two-way communication when they sit down and they become vulnerable or they become emotional and they touch that difficult part of themselves that they didn't really want to talk about, but it becomes evident that it's a need for it to be, you know, explored. How important is that two-way communication?
it's very important. I want to preface this with one thing that we've been talking about is, if you notice in yourself, for anyone who's listening, if you notice yourself resistance, I don't want to talk to someone. I don't pay attention to that, because that resistance is speaking of blind spots or of discomfort that I don't want to lean into something. And with people in leadership roles, a very specific example is when I propose to them, let's part of what we're going to do is do a 360 assessment to gather more valuable information from your surroundings, and the common reaction is, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Very understandable, because it's a vulnerable position that you're putting in, and because, you know, anonymous feedback will be given, and that's a vulnerable place to be. So if you notice that resistance, well, then that resistance is telling you something about where you're at and about what you might be afraid of. And I would encourage people to lean into the resistance. In other words, don't become more resistant, but all right, what's this resistance telling me? Why am I afraid of certain things? Why am I afraid of hiring a coach or going to therapy? Or why am I afraid of a 360? Why am I afraid as a couple to do an assessment about our relationship? Yeah. Which is also very common. We're like, oh, we don't want to touch that monster, right? We don't want to awaken the beast, or we don't want to discover things that we don't want to know. That's fine. Well then live in ignorance, okay? But you're going to live in that blind spot about yourself and that lack of self-awareness, and you're probably not allowing. You're probably, what's the word? Not allowing yourself an opportunity of growth, or not allowing yourself as a couple an opportunity of growth, and to really being in a better position. Now, there are situations where you're like, no, let's not touch that. Let's not go there, right? But so it's important to assess, but to understand where that resistance and where that fear is coming from. And if you understand, well, maybe it's not coming from the healthiest place, all right, well then let's step into a little bit discomfort, because where there's discomfort that's well managed, there's a lot of growth.
That's true.
When we go to the gym or whatever, any type of exercise is discomfort. In fact, we have to traumatize muscles just a little bit so that they can
Yes.
grow.
Tear them.
Right? You tear them just a little bit so that they can grow. And so it's the law of growth that it's uphill, and you don't go uphill. Gravity doesn't pull you uphill. You have to be intentional about going uphill. Gravity necessarily just pulls us downhill.
Yeah.
Okay, so intentionality is so important about stepping into discomfort, stepping into growth. Now, to your question about psychological safety,
Yes.
it's a lot of talk about it, and so it becomes a very complex topic. But the reality is, in certain settings, and whether in a romantic relationship or in a friendship, in a family,
Yeah.
safety, if we want our children to share things with us, it's important that they feel that they can safely share something with us.
Yeah.
Right? And in a loving environment, in a constructive environment, in a place where they are held in a space where they can be themselves and they can talk about whatever they did, whatever they're going through.
Yeah.
The same thing in a romantic relationship. That's my spouse or partner I can hold them in this wonderful safe space where they can share with me whatever they're going through, and I will listen. Right? I'm not going to try to fix them. I'm not going to get defensive, right? Because that affects then the safety. Well, I'm not going to bring it up because they're going to lash out at me or because we're going to get into a fight. And then that's where we start leaving things where we don't talk about them.
True.
So in the workspace, it's also it's a bit more complex in the workspace because in the workspace, it's a professional space and we're just supposed to work. Right? We're supposed to perform professionally.
Output.
Yes, but at the same time, we want our people to be creative. And when
Yes.
there's not safety, there's less innovation. And there's a lot of studies that show this. When people don't feel that they can innovate, or when there's not safety around it, then there's less creativity, there's less innovation. The leadership is not getting a true picture of what's going on because they're just fed information. They're fed the right information so that everyone feels somewhat safe. So it's about, in the professional space, it's about trying to let people have enough space where they can be themselves, right? In a professional setting, obviously. Right? There's always certain boundaries that have to be established. But where there's, and that's why diversity is so important, that people that diversity can thrive in a psychologically safe environment. And with that diversity, I'm not talking about surface level diversity. There's also deep level diversity. So surface level is sort of what's more visible, whether it be gender, whether it be color of skin, whether it be ethnicity, things like this. But also cognitive diversity. Diversity of background, right? These are things that aren't always so visible, but we want that to thrive in the professional space. And it can thrive that when we give people permission to be themselves professionally, but to be themselves so that they can create, they can innovate, and the sense of belonging has become very important because as human beings, we want to belong. And there's a lot of, it's talking about the leadership in the professional space. There's a lot of demands on organizations now, and it's very interesting. Because before, I think traditionally, if we go back decades, you didn't expect much from your organization. You showed up, you went to work, you got compensated, and you went home, right? But now the way society's evolved, and I think there's probably different reasons to explain this, but the fact is that sometimes some people expect more from their organization. Right? They want to feel safe. They want their organization to help them care about well-being. All right. They want the organization to be a place where they can grow as human beings, right? Where they're treated as such, and not just as a production machine.
The number.
Right. And because in the end, people want to be seen, they want to be valued, they want to be appreciated, be acknowledged. Right. These are things that humans want, whether it be in the personal space. Right? If you have a partner, a romantic relationship, or you're married to someone, these are the first needs that person needs fulfilled. But I think socially, because of the human being, there's been a huge identity crisis, and there's a lot of I think, emotional needs that human beings have that aren't being satisfied in some relationships. So then they want this to be satisfied in the workplace.
Yes.
So that's why the sense of belonging, a lot of people are giving it a lot of importance. In the new generation, I've kind of got off on a tangent here, but the new generation is no longer loyal to an organization. It's about they're loyal to themselves. I'm loyal to my professional development, my career development, because now I have so many options that I don't have to work for you.
Yes.
And so that's sort of that leverage that now the individual has a lot more power over the organization, and so the organization is trying to be better with their people. I think that's progress as the human race.
Yeah.
I think that's progress, but I think there's also a limit, right? I can't expect my organization to solve all my problems, right? In the end, it's a transaction. And my organization, yes, there's a loyalty, but my organization doesn't owe me loyalty, and I don't owe them loyalty, right? And hopefully, loyalty is a fruit or a flower that.
Yes.
And when there's a wonderful relationship, there is this loyalty, but it goes both ways. The organizations have to treat their people better.
True.
But also, employees have to maybe be realistic in their expectations for what an organization can do. And then going back to psychological safety, there's a common problem in leadership that they like. You can trust me. You can, tell me whatever you want to share, whatever you want to share with me. And no, they can't share anything they want to share with you because of the professional relationship and the power differential. And I work sometimes, as in the military, and I would say that oftentimes to the officers, or to the senior enlisted, they would say to the young sailors or Marines, "You can share anything with me," and I would tell them, "No, they can't, because there's certain things that you have to report." Right? So don't promise them. You can't promise them confidentiality when you have a duty to report certain things, right? When you write their fitness reports or when you do, we have to be very honest with people of what they can share with me, and also because I'm your boss, I don't want you don't feel like you have to share certain things with me, but I do want to know how you're going, how things are going. I do want to know what's going on, how I can better serve you, and so that trust. When a leader really cares about their people, trust will come from that. And you'll see that people will then begin to share more with you because they trust you. But also confidentiality is so important. Confidentiality is under attack in today's day and age, where we think that everyone has the right to know everything about everyone. Okay? And with social media, there's sort of this thing about, well, we all have rights to share everything about ourselves, and we all have the right to know everything about us. And that's not true. That's not true. And so we are very careless with information.
Yeah. Dangerously careless.
Yes, and that happens also in the workplace. And so if, for example, I'll use an example. If I hear my leader or my boss talking about one of my peers or one of my companions at work, in a way that, it makes you think, do they talk about me like that?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Makes you wonder.
And so then you start to pull back.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to disclose as much. I'm not going to be as trustful. Because if they use information so carelessly, then I'm not sure it's safe with that person. That can happen with a therapist. That can happen with a coach. That can happen with a pastor. And that can happen with a boss. So anyone who's in those positions, if they're listening, it's just how we care for people's information.
Yes.
With so much, because information is sacred, and information is very powerful. And we have to deal with it very respectfully.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the golden rule of how would I want someone to deal with my information? Well, then I must do the same. Treat others as you would want to be treated. Deal with other people's information the way you would want them to deal with your information. So going back to that is that leadership, oftentimes we can't force people to trust you.
No.
Right? Trust starts at the top. And then you can't demand that they share certain things with you or just expect them to, because trust is a gift
It's true.
that we are given. and that we can give. But also in professional leadership, when we're in space, there's certain things that we have no right to know about someone, right? And there's certain things that if I know that, then I have to proceed in a certain way professionally. And so we can't promise confidentiality. We have to be very careful how you promise confidentiality.
Absolutely.
You might catch yourself promising it and then breaking the promise, or you might catch yourself promising confidentiality and then being caught on not reporting on something that you were, because of you were supposed to report. You're caught in a difficult position. So interesting, and thank you for just bringing up psychological safety, because it sounds very simple, but there's complexities to it.
Very complex. And I was thinking a few things as you explained that so wonderfully. Nothing on the one side, nothing stifles a psychological safe space as much as micromanagement. I've seen in the corporate spaces where I've done spiritual counseling and mentoring and coaching. Micromanagement really becomes a problem because it stifles creativity, like you've said. It really puts them in a space where they're not sure. They have this wonderful idea, but they're not sure if they can share it because they're being micromanaged all the time, and this puts them in a space of stress and anxiety and overthinking. And the moment that overthinking kicks in, it's like the creativity just dies down. And then on the other hand, you were speaking about the fact that, there is a level of professionalism that we have to be loyal to our company as our company is loyal to us. And I always used to say in the pastoral space, in the ministerial space, that, there is one, I'd say, place where I wouldn't be able to keep complete confidentiality, and that's just, our denomination. But if a crime was committed or something serious transpired, so I always made that plain before we started our counseling or our sessions. We have to communicate this with people. And I want to speak to the audience today. Whatever relationship you're in, there's so many different levels of relationships, so many different arenas. Never break someone's trust, because that relationship will never ever be the same after that event. And you will essentially create soul or spirit wounds, and they will have to go and deal with that. And we don't want to do harm, we want to do good. And we want to make sure that everybody is tended to and everybody is enjoying that psychological safe space for the employees and the employers as well. Now, you were talking about relationships, and I was thinking about the romantic relationships that I was coaching during COVID, for instance. And adaptability really became a topic of note because some relationships were adaptable in that situation and some weren't. And I want to ask you, how important is adaptability in a relationship of any kind, and also how does that influence our personal growth and development, if we're adaptable or not so?
I lost you for a second. Can you repeat the question? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
absolutely. In adaptability, talking about adaptability, in COVID, there were relationships that flourished, and there were also relationships that ended. And that, I believe, it was about the adaptability level in the relationships that they were in. How important is that in a relationship to be adaptable? And also, how important is adaptability in our personal growth and development?
Yes. I would say, adaptability, some of it's a personality traits that some people have it stronger than others.
Yeah.
Depending on how we're wired and, personality, temperament, and all that, how that's structured. There's genetic side to that. But it behooves all of us, the greater, adaptability and flexibility is definitely a strength that some people might have naturally and others might want to develop it, especially in a world like today. Right, where there's so much change, where there's, and I think there's a beauty to that, but it's also a challenge for us as human beings. So adaptability, again, there's personalities, it's part of it that we have to understand about each other and about ourselves. But and I'll talk about the leadership space. And now, another word that they use is agility. Right? It is so important, right? Flexibility and adaptability, because you have a bigger picture of what's going on when you're adapt, when you can flex. I sort of think of, rigidity, or it's sort of, because we're, as human beings, we're people of habits, right, and patterns, and those serve us well, but sometimes they can get in the way of us seeing the bigger picture. So it's how do we balance? How do we balance that routines and structure with flexibility and adaptability? And then, as with anything in the human experience, we have two extremes that we're playing with. And some people are very rigid and structured, and it serves them well in many ways.
Yes.
But then there's others who are very adaptable and flexible, and that serves them well in many ways. But there's downside to all of that. Let's go back, even just let's bring that into self-awareness. Have this awareness around when the structure and rigidness or whatever it is, it helps me, but also when does it get in the way? They have flexibility and adaptability, which can also be someone who's sort of like all over the place, very disorganized, but they adapt to everything. Right? But how does that also get in your way? And how do those things maybe get in the way of your relationship? You're very different. So going back to your question, is some people flourished during COVID, probably because they had exercised these muscles, or there was a more intimacy, there was a greater knowledge of each other. And so, when people that have struggled in adapting to to COVID, for example, it could be back, and let's go back to what I said way at the beginning. It could be that there was a lot of stuff that they had not dealt with, and they didn't know how to deal with it, and COVID brought it to the surface.
Most probably, I agree.
Right, and that's probably and that's what crisis does. Crisis brings certain things to the surface, right? And how we manage it is so important. So, and then if we go into the leadership space around adaptability and flexibility, it's very important. Now, it depends what your position is, but again, we go back to flexibility and adaptability. It's the human element of how we deal with our people and how we deal with the market. Right, and I think creativity and innovation flourish more in an agile environment. But it depends on the position. It depends on the job, because there's certain environments where you don't want agility. You don't want, because in manufacturing plants where everything has to do what it has to follow a certain process. Right? But you also have to have plans. You have to be ready to flex if something happens, something breaks down. Right? We have to have a plan B. So we prepare we plan for the best, but we also prepare for the worst.
Yes.
Right. And this is something that's important in relationships, something that's important in our own lives, and in the professional life. Because when something comes our way that we weren't expecting, and if we've thought about, if we have another plan in mind, a backup plan, well, then we've already thought about it. We can pivot, as they say nowadays, or we can adjust in a healthier way than if we didn't think about different things that could happen. This goes into our personal lives. All of us, we're all hit by things that we didn't expect. Whether they come from the inside of us or whether they come from the outside. In relationships, we're hit by things that we didn't expect. And in the professional life. So that's where adaptability and flexibility is really important. And then it's about what importance do we give to certain things. I think with flexibility and adaptability, sometimes we can overstress or give more importance to certain things that might not deserve them, and sort of ruin an opportunity of growth by getting caught up in the small stuff. So it's something, again, it goes back to the emotional intelligence and how because the emotions can sort of make a big deal out of a small thing.
True.
So we want to put those things into perspective. But at the same time, then there's certain things that are very important, right? And so we want to give them due importance, not brush over them. And we go back into leadership spaces, whether it be as spouses, whether it be in the professional spaces, people give different weight to different things. So it's important, we want to pay attention to, as a leader, what's important to my people? What motivates them? What are rewards that really speak to them? what's important to them. Because as a leader, often, no, that's not a big deal, but it's a big deal to my employee,
Yeah.
and also to my spouse. We can say, well, that's not a big deal, but it's a big deal to my spouse. So to understand, well, why is it a big deal? Oh, I didn't know that about you. I didn't understand that this was so important, that this was such value. And so we learn so much through that in the human interaction. So it's the beautiful complexity of human beings.
It is. It
Complex
is.
but beautiful.
True, true. I think it all comes down to that acknowledgement of, someone's views and emotions, and always just to sit down and discuss certain themes and topics, and share what are the differences in your views. How do they connect? How do they differ? And how can you make them work, for you in that relationship? Because that's also a possibility. Something you mentioned, flowers that bloom, something can bloom out of something that you never would have thought, just
Right.
because of differences. I've seen that before as well. So it's not always a
Yes.
negative thing. And you explained that, you articulated that so well. Thank you so much. And when we talk about relationships, there's a lot of resilience involved. And I know you teach individuals how to be resilient. How do you approach that? How do you teach someone to be resilient, or what guidelines do you give?
Yes, I don't know if I can teach someone to be resilient. Right? It's like, how do you teach someone to be fit? I mean, you can't just they have to do the work, right? And resilience is about that. It's about fitness. It's about and everyone, and it's important in the resilience space or topic. It's important not to compare ourselves, because we all have different levels of resilience,
Yeah.
right? And they say, in the simple way of explaining resilience is, it's the ability to bounce back, but it's the ability to bounce back better,
Yes,
right? And that's said so easily, but it's not easy to do.
it's true.
Saying that, resilience is a lot more. Resilience is like a puzzle, and there's a lot of pieces to it, right? So emotional intelligence is one of those pieces. Self-awareness is another one of those pieces, right? Self-care is another one of those pieces. And then there's other pieces of the puzzle which we won't go into now. But so it's, again, like a lot of things, it's more complex. But the beauty about resilience, and it's become sort of a buzzword nowadays because everyone's talking about it, is the beauty about it is it's about how we can be better human beings. How we can show up better for ourselves and for others. With the conviction, we know that as you said before, some challenge or adversity is going to hit me. And we want to be ready as we can.
Yeah.
Right? And so resilience, it is that ability. It's the ability to bounce. But if you haven't done the work beforehand, to be prepared, and as much as you can be prepared, well, don't expect to be resilient. Resilience is something that all of a sudden I learned one day because I had to. It's a series of pieces that we slowly put together so that we can have really good health, and then we can have health when we face challenges and come through on the other side a bit maybe battered, but stronger, and having learned a lot in the process. So it's a big word, and it means so much. But it's often not explained. So, and I've just really touched on the surface. It's often not explained. So, going back to how can I teach someone that? I can give you the principles of what's important, what can make you more resilient, but I can't do the work for you.
Yeah, true.
But part of this is, what we're doing now, and what we do, in coaching is a tool that will necessarily help you be more resilient.
Yes.
So resilience could be a consequence of a good coaching relationship, of a good therapeutic relationship, of a good romantic relationship. All these things, because it's also about identity. Resilience has to do with identity. So so many pieces to the puzzle.
Yes.
I can teach you the principles, and in the workplace or in your personal lives, we can set up sort of tools or patterns or structures or mechanisms that will help us grow in resilience. But it's not something that you sort of just can just teach someone and you're resilient.
Absolutely. I love that. No, that's so true. You know, we have individual resiliency, and I agree with you. Having a mentor or a coach really assists you in that because they walk with you, they get to know you, and they teach you the tools and the principles, like you've mentioned. And then also, you know, that's why, for instance, you do marriage counseling as well. You have those assessments, you have those tips and tools. That also helps couple to be resilient together. I really believe in teamwork with regards to relationships, be it romantic or in the business space or corporate, because the moment that we are resilient together, we are just that more motivated to face the obstacle head on, to put whatever is the problem on the table and to deal with it systematically. So thank you so much for that answer. I want to ask you to tell the audience, how are they able to reach out to you, you know, for your coaching services, any other products that you have? You do public speaking as well. How can they reach you?
Yes, thank you. The best way to reach me right now is either through Facebook, Matthew Brackett, Instagram, Matthew Brackett Alliance, and then LinkedIn from Matthew Brackett. My website, bracketalliance.com. It's not live right now, so if you try to visit it, it's going to say coming soon. So it will be live in about 2 weeks. And so that's another place where you can also find me.
Fantastic, fantastic. And before we close, Matthew, will you leave us with wise words of wisdom as we close out? Anything you want to communicate with the audience today?
Thank you, Juanita. No, thank you for the opportunity to be on this program with you. I would just go back to what we've talked about a lot. Right? And so if we could summarize just a few things, it's we're going to experience discomfort and challenges and pain at some point in our life, whether it be personally or in a certain circumstance with other people. The pain or discomfort, it has a lesson for us, so lean into it. Oftentimes we can't lean into it on our own because we don't know how to, and you're not meant to know how to, but that's where it's very important to do it with someone else who will help me do that. Not because they know better or whatever, but because as human beings, we are interdependent. We need each other. And so I need the right type of person to help me lean into the discomfort and pain and to learn the messages that are there. And so that has a lot to do then with what we talked about, self-awareness, right? And then that emotional intelligence is how I regulate my emotions in a way that serves the bigger picture, and how I learn how to navigate the emotions of those around me in a way that also serves the bigger picture. So those would be my concluding thoughts about the many things that we could say.
Thank you so much, Matthew. It was a wonderful, wonderful privilege to have you on Meticulous Moments. We're going to cheer you on. I encourage the Meticulous Moments audience to network with you, connect with you on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll see you soon, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Juanita. Likewise.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're the #1 fastest growing community and tribe of some of the highest level entrepreneurs all around the country and around the world. We're in 36 states across the U.S., in 11 international countries, and over 240 plus members, growing every single day. And I'm honored, excited, and I'm glad to say that I'm proud to be the official sponsor of the Meticulous Moments podcast with Juanita Kapp. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited for this journey.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Ellis. I'm from the Thought-Provoking Change community. I am honored and humbled to be a sponsor of the Meticulous Moments podcast, brought to you by the one and only Juanita Kapp. It is such a joy and privilege to be on this journey with you, and I look forward to seeing where it takes not only Meticulous Moments, but also Thought-Provoking Change. Looking forward to this partnership. You're a great person with a great podcast.
Hey everybody, my name is Patrick Rude. I'm the owner of Rude Financial Services, a proud sponsor of the Meticulous Moments podcast, hosted and directed by the beautiful, strong, and intelligent Juanita Kapp. I cannot tell you enough about what this woman has done with this podcast and the effect that she has had on me and all of the other sponsors and people that listen. Don't miss it.